It is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
President Joe Biden gave his first presidential press conference at the White House today. He addressed questions about his immigration policy, COVID-19, gun control, but the topic of today's video was his response to a question about voting rights and specifically voter suppression. This is especially important given the sheer number of voter suppression laws that have been filed or passed in the wake of the GOP loss in 2020. Make no mistake, Republicans themselves admit they have no chance if H.R. 1 passes. They themselves have committed to attacking critical civil rights legislation to maintain power in a country that is trending against their core demographic, which is overwhelmingly white, conservative, and increasingly extreme. This is an assault on the civil rights movement itself and the gains our forebears fought and died for. But before I continue, watch this clip.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I want to go back to voting rights. And as Yamiche mentioned, Republican legislatures across the country are working to pass bills that would restrict voting, particularly Democrats fear impacting minority voters and young voters, the very people who helped to get you elected in November. Are you worried that if you don't manage to pass voting rights legislation, that your party is going to lose seats and possibly lose control of the House and the Senate in 2022?
What I'm worried about is how un-American this whole initiative is. It's sick. It's sick. Deciding in some states that you cannot bring water to people standing in line, waiting to vote. Deciding that you're going to end voting at 5 o'clock when working people are just getting off work. Deciding that there will be no absentee ballots under the most rigid circumstances. It's all designed, and I'm going to spend my time doing three things. One, trying to figure out how to pass the legislation passed by the House, number one. Number two, educating the American public. The Republican voters I know find this despicable. Republican voters, the folks out outside this White House. I'm not talking about the elected officials. I'm talking about voters. And so I'm convinced that we'll be able to stop this because it is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle. I mean, this is gigantic, what they're trying to do. And it cannot be sustained. And do everything in my power, along with my friends in the House and the Senate, to keep that from becoming the law.
Is there anything else you can do about it besides passing legislation?
The answer is yes, but I'm not going to lay out a strategy in front of the whole world and you now.
I'm going to go a bit further. Not only is it sick, okay, it's blatantly anti-democratic. Stifling democracy under the false guise of protecting against voter fraud is an attack on democracy itself. You can't have it both ways. You either support democracy or you don't. But I want to read to you all sections from a couple of articles here before I continue. The first article is from the Daily Beast, okay? It is titled, Georgia GOP Goes All Out to Suppress Black Votes Amid MAGA Civil War. The Secretary of State has done everything in his power to suppress black votes, and his own party is still trying to push him out for being insufficiently loyal and cruel. So I have several things highlighted here, and I scroll down and it says, in response to those black citizens registering and voting, Georgia Republicans are clamping down. The state GOP targeted black churches responsible for leading voter registration drives and organizing transportation to the polls with a proposed law that would make it a crime to conduct those activities on a Sunday, which is insane. Souls to the polls is an indelible part of life in the Black South, a means of strengthening community through the proud and public exercise of hard-won and still imperfect imperfectly guaranteed voting rights. Targeting black church activism does so much more than simply hobble efforts to register voters and cast ballots. It sends a message from the white Republican establishment that black spaces, black communities, and black identities exist only to the extent Georgia's GOP power brokers allow them to exist. And then it says, quote, "This bill continues to be nothing but voter suppression," end quote. Black Voters Matter Fund co-founder Cliff Albright said. And then he said, quote, "The recent changes are nothing more than makeup and cologne on Jim Crow," end quote. It's a statement of just how dangerously authoritarian the national GOP has become that Raffensperger, who supports these voter suppression measures, is still not reliably authoritarian enough, which is crazy, to please Trump's MAGA mob. Raffensperger, I think is how you pronounce his name, doesn't just approve of crushing souls to the polls. He proudly attached his endorsement to measures ending automatic voter registration, banning mail-in ballot drop boxes, effectively ending absentee voting, and sharply reducing hours available for weekend voting. And then further down, I thought I had something else highlighted. So that's pretty much it right there. You should definitely check out the entire article for sure. But that sort of just gives you an idea, a very short and brief idea of what's going on in one state. And that's something that Biden actually touched on in today's press briefing. But that's not it, though. Then there's another article from ABC News, and this article is titled, "GOP Warns HR 1 Could Be Absolutely Devastating for Republicans. Some openly fret that broader access to voting will harm the party's chances." Of course it will, for reasons I'm going to lay out in a second here. And then it says here, I have some highlighted parts of the article. It says HR 1, known as the For the People Act, seeks to abolish hurdles to voting, reform the role of money in politics, and tighten federal ethics rules. Among the key tenets of the bill to overhaul the nation's election system, allowing for no excuse mail voting, at least 15 days of early voting, automatic voter registration, and restoring voting rights to felons who have completed their prison sentences. Some of this stuff I went over in a previous voter suppression voting rights video that I did on the channel. Definitely check it out. And then it says further down, for Republicans, HR 1 represents a Democratic power grab that could tilt elections in their favor for years to come. As Senate thankfully not, as Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, a Republican of Kentucky, put it, one Arizona state lawmaker called it anti-Republican, which is total BS. But then it has a quote here from Mark Weaver, a GOP consultant based in Ohio, who's also an election law attorney. He says, quote, HR 1 is an attempt to use the Democrats' slim majority to unlevel the playing field and take away the rights of roughly half of the voters in the country. No, expanding voting rights is not taking away voting. You see how I have to stop here for a second because I have to expose these lies. You see how they manipulate the actual agenda of HR 1, because to them, expanding voting rights is a threat to their power. Okay, so expanding voting rights means to them, you're taking away the rights of their voters. And that's not what voting means. That's not what voting is. Okay, when you vote, the person that gets the most votes is the winner. That's how voting works. And expanding voting rights is just expanding the franchise. It's not taking away voting rights or taking away power from voters in half the voters in the country simply because your party platform is not popular enough in most of the country. That's a party problem. That is a partisan problem with Republicans. The playing field should not be arbitrarily or artificially maintained purely just to give Republicans better chances of winning. Republicans need to fix their platform. That's their issue. Okay, not expanding voting rights. Other Republicans condemned the bill as a naked federal overreach of states' rights, saying that the legislation will usurp the decentralized electoral system in favor of a nationalized one-size-fits-all approach. And some Republican lawmakers, officials, and strategists go even further, signaling the GOP's opposition to such extensive electoral reforms is based on the fear it will cause them to lose elections. Okay, which is the main reason they don't like H.R. 1. Then it says, quote, if the Democrats pass H.R. 1, it's going to be absolutely devastating for Republicans in this country, said Jay Williams, a Republican strategist in Georgia, a state seeing one of the most aggressive campaigns to restrict voting. And then it says, quote, they're just going to basically just shaft so many Republicans in places where they would actually have opportunities to pick up, which, as I said, is not true. And then it says further down, after more than a decade of Republicans scaling back voting access, the latest push comes after former President Donald Trump and his allies spent months seeding distrust in the electoral system based on fabricated claims of a stolen election. So now you begin to see what a lot of those claims about a stolen election were really all about. Yes, it was about a very long shot attempt of Trump staying in office, but I think the broader agenda was creating a foundation to suppress votes on a scale we have not seen. And truth be told, this has been going on really hardcore since 2013, since Obama won re-election in 2012. Okay, that's 2013 is when they gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. Okay, and they've been, every election cycle, every few years, they've been passing more and more voter suppression laws. They had interstate cross-check, okay, which H.R. 1 attacks that as well. They're going to become more and more heavy-handed with voter suppression as their voting power, the right wing's voting power, diminishes more and more and more as the years go on. And then the last paragraph I have highlighted here says, I think stopping H.R. 1 is more relative to Republican success in the future than Donald Trump, Williams said, as the former president remains the most influential Republican in the party. And then he says, quote, the ramifications of passing legislation like that would be very difficult for Republicans to win a majority status after that. And there you have it, from the horse's mouth. So look, here are my thoughts. If your society cannot or will not protect voting rights, you don't have a democracy. Okay, the right to vote is a foundational concept within democracy. You lose it and your country begins to reflect the views of certain groups that are allowed access. That's really the main reason why white supremacy and racism festered out of control in this country for so long after the Civil War. It's quite literally because white racists were primarily the ones that only had access to the ballot box. They were the only ones that had their rights actually listened to and actually honored through the electoral process. I mean, that's not the only reason, but that's a huge reason. Like they went out of their way all throughout the Jim Crow era to stop black people from voting because they did not want black people to be able to exercise counter power to theirs. This is the vision of America that the GOP endorses. They want selective voting. They want to bring back Jim Crow era voting standards where millions and millions of black people were stifled or completely blocked from voting. This is meant to give unjust amounts of power, voting power, to white conservatives, the group that has lost more voting power over the years than any other group. Okay, when you have Republicans admitting that the GOP won't win if H.R. 1 is passed, something voting rights activists have been saying for years, by the way, believe them when they say that, because it's the truth and it explains why, as a group, the right wing has become so anti-democratic in recent years. They don't want democracy if they can't dictate who runs it. They definitely don't want a multiracial democracy where voting power is more evenly distributed across the population. Okay. Voting rights is a top 3 issue for me because the entire progressive agenda hinges on Democrats having equal and fair access to the ballot box. The progressive agenda is dead in the water if Democrats can't vote and if Republicans have more electoral power than they should. Okay, but the big question mark is obviously Senator Joe Manchin, who has recently said that any vote on voting rights needs Republican support. So let me make this clear. You are not a Democrat if you're on the wrong side of voting rights. End of story. He knows Republicans aren't going to support H.R. 1 in the Senate. He knows this. So he's basically defending a racist office procedure. The filibuster is not in the Constitution. It is not a law. It is an office procedure. It's equivalent to that. Okay. The filibuster under the, he's defending the racist filibuster under the false guise of bipartisanship. Okay. Which is really just a cop out. I said on Twitter today that I bet money that Republicans in the Senate are in Manchin's ear doing whatever they can to stop him from flipping on H.R. 1. So his obstructionism is not even helping his own party. It's aiding the GOP. So this entire notion of Democrats needing Joe Manchin because we need his vote is proving more and more to be just false. Okay, but I like the pressure being put indirectly onto him by people like Joe Biden, who spoke out against voter suppression today, and also by former President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle Obama, who have also come out in support of H.R. 1. Manchin's fellow senators as well, like Raphael Warnock, are also supporting H.R. 1, obviously. So he's being indirectly called out, but they need to drop this decorum BS and say his name. Stop dancing around the issue. I'm not sure what Warnock can say because I know there are a lot of like Senate rules and stuff like that. But the Obamas definitely don't have anything to lose by naming names. So just do it. We have to keep up the pressure. And they're not the only ones either. You have a lot of people in the House, a lot of the progressive Democrats in the House, like Cory Bush and some others who have been applying the pressure. And we all need to apply the pressure. Because if the Democrats don't do anything about voting rights, they are basically allowing Republicans to stifle their core constituency, the black vote. And the Democrats would not be where they are today without the black vote. So something needs to be done about this, and something needs to be done about this now. Or else Joe Manchin is the enemy of the Democratic Party. Point blank, period. So, my name is Brian Lewis. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.